Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, Ozzie almost got that thing done by himself.
And we haven't yet seen a big splash from the Hawks in free agency, but word is they might be making one, but at what cost?
And last but not least, and for the culture, how did you celebrate the 4th? That's all coming up next, right here on ATL Day Ones. Let's get it.
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
I want to start by saying thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And wherever you download your podcast, make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. Really appreciate that from you in advance. Today's episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. But first, today, when we talk about the Atlanta Braves and what they've been able to do as of late, they got the win in the first game of the series against the Guardians with Michael Harris leading the charge and with 2 home runs. But I think that Ozzie Albies tried to do the same thing. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get it done. 6-5, they lose to the Guardians yesterday in extra innings. But it seems like it's a theme here. Once you get late in the games, when the Braves, if the Braves are down, because we know they like to jump out on folks, but it seems like I just get a feeling in my soul just, hey, these guys are going to come back. And I think Ozzie Albies almost pulled that bad boy out yesterday.
Yeah, I would say the same. I always look like if I'm not watching it and I'm just kind of watching, if I'm not watching the game and I'm just kind of watching the stat line or I'm watching which inning they're in. And I saw, of course, it was tied 2-2 in that 5th inning. And that's where I felt like, okay, we're good. Braves are good. And then even though they went down, I said, no, they're still good. And like you said, that Albies came back and did it again in the 9th inning and descended to extras. Here's what I like about this. Here's what was still encouraging for me. Yes, it was a loss. But of course, they still have the opportunity to win the series today. That's number one. Number two, it was only the second loss in like 19 games. Yes. And then their last 3 losses, just 1 run. They lose by 1 run. The reason I say that is because I feel like that's what tells you that the Braves are always in it, regardless of what happened last night.
Yeah, and that's the thing that when you talk about, like, we have like great players like a Ronald Acuna or a Matt Olson or even Austin Riley, when those guys are coming to the plate, but right behind those guys, those are some of the things that you can count on, right? We understand where they are. Like, they've won 9 out of the last 10, and they've been killing it as of late, and they're 30 games over 500 right now, with 4 games left leading into the All-Star break. So all of those things just kind of really make me start to think like, all right. And I don't want to get ahead of myself because, me, sometimes I get a little excited because, this is my hometown team. But I'm thinking like we've seen this movie before in 2003 when they start hitting all these home runs and scoring all of these runs. That team kind of crapped out in the playoffs. And I'm just like, man, I hope they don't, get on this hot streak and start, moving down into a space where they just run into some pitchers and they be like, oh, man, what happened to the bats? And then the next thing you know, we're like sitting outside of the playoffs and like, oh, my God, we wasted a 100-win season.
But the reason, and I think about it from time to time, but you know what always offsets that thought? Last season and Ronald Acuna Jr. So when I go back to last season, they were on fire. They could have been back-to-back champions. I mean, they could have easily won that World Series had they gotten there, but they didn't. It was almost like they kind of went to sleep, and was it Phillies, a red hot team that just kind of came and just like basically manhandled them. And that was something that I think was and is something lingering for them, right? That's the kind of motivation where you're like, no, we don't want that again. We want to get all the way to the World Series, if not win it. So I think there's some motivation there. And I think Ronald Acuna Jr. has some extra motivation because he wasn't really a factor in that World Series run. And I think for him, great if he gets the MVP for the season for the National League. But I think more importantly for him is he wants that pennant. And I think those 2 motivating factors are going to be like, even if they have a swoon, which it's 162 games. You're probably going to have a streak of 2 or 3 losses or what have you. But as long as they keep that motivation top of mind, I really do think they'll be fine.
Yeah, thank you. You just always bring that calming peace and serenity. It's like, yeah, the Braves will be fine. Yes, I agree to you. I agree that the Braves will be fine. And kind of work backwards on that thing, right, on the other side of the All-Star break. And I think that, I really feel like they'll be okay, and we'll be able to get a better view as to what they'll look like going into the playoffs, on the other side of the All-Star break, because, we know in August, Max Fried is supposed to come back, and then in September, Kyle Wright is supposed to come back. And I think that, this period right here leading up to the All-Star break, I feel like the Braves, Brian Snitker and Alex Anthopoulos is going to use these games to figure out what young pups they want to continue to go with, because we got Michael Soroka coming to the mound on tonight to close out the series against the Guardians. And then we've seen AJ Smith-Shawver, we've seen Jared Schuster, all of those guys. Like, I think they're going to have to lean out some of those young arms and kind of figure out, okay, who's going to be the guy who's going to be consistently staying up with the club, until Max Fried and Kyle Wright come back.
Yeah, I would agree as well. And Kobe Allard didn't have a bad start yesterday. Yeah. It just wasn't the lights out start he had 6 days ago, right? So he's one of those who is looking to solidify a place in that rotation, especially as they await Freedom Wright coming back. But again, that's an embarrassment of riches. And that competition actually could bode in the Braves' favor too, because as long as they're competing for a spot on that roster and they want to stay up, get wins, and go deep into the game. Like, we're talking 6, if not 7 innings. That's how you keep yourself up. And of course, that always bodes well for the Braves.
Absolutely. And I think that competition piece that you just talked about, see Bryce Elder. Like, we talked about on the show, early on in the week about how he was able to, he was the starter for the Gwinnett Stripers. He was the opening day starter for the Gwinnett Stripers. And here we are talking about this man going to the All-Star break. So I think that, whoever that young arm is that they decide is going to be the guy to be consistently stay up with the ball club going forward, I really feel like that's going to be a something that, they can't make the All-Star team, but you can really solidify yourself going forward as far as, potentially making yourself your own rotational spot.
Right. And then one more cosign for you before we wrap up. Every year there's some young pitcher that steps up and does his thing. So, and, shocks the world. Max Fried became the ace when Michael Soroka went down. And then Kyle Wright shocked the world. Spencer Strider shocked the world halfway into last season. And now you're talking about Bryce Elder. So again, I feel like, okay, Bryce Elder's probably that guy this year that's, the biggest surprise, but there could be another. Like you said, the competition could make them have another guy who's going to step up and be the shocker. You go, oh my God, I can't believe this guy is, pitching lights out. Again, an embarrassment of riches.
First, I got to let you know that this episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel Sportsbook is the #1 sportsbook in America. And guess what, guys? For all you new customers, they got a special deal right just for you. For first timers, they have the no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. All you got to do is just go to FanDuel.com right now to go check it out. It is safe, it's secure, it's super easy to use. You don't have to worry about anybody getting all your information. All you have to do is just go to the website, put in your information, and then go right there. And you know how sometimes your homeboy don't want to pay that bet as soon as it comes through? You don't have to worry about that. You get your money instantly. You don't have to. There's no clearinghouse you have to go through. You don't have to sign any paperwork and all that stuff. You get your money right there, and it's right there for you. So head to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and take advantage of the no sweat first bet, because FanDuel, it is the #1 sportsbook in America, and also it is the #1 sportsbook for Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball has permission to use their copyrights.
The Toronto Raptors kind of remind me of the Atlanta Hawks in that I don't think they know whether they want to strive to get to the top of the Eastern Conference, reset, or just outright rebuild. And they say that because of the departure of Fred VanVleet. I think that kind of shocked everybody. But when they did that, that's when the questions started coming like, oh, wait a minute. Well, if you're going to get rid of Fred VanVleet, you're okay to get rid of him. Then what about, and then the names just started coming out. What about OG Anunoby? Scotty Barnes, although most people thought they'd keep Scotty Barnes. And now Pascal Siakam, nobody saw that coming. But the day is here and everybody is clamoring at him, chomping at the bit, including the Hawks. Rumor mill has it that the Hawks have been trying to get a deal done to bring Pascal Siakam to Atlanta. But the challenge is, Jarvis, how do you get that guy here? Because you really don't have a lot in terms of draft capital, if you will, for starters. Yeah. So the question becomes, the rumor says it depends on who you listen to, right? Dejounte Murray and DeAndre Hunter. Dejounte Murray and maybe a package deal where you might get the young guns, AJ Griffin, Jalen Johnson, or DeAndre Hunter and those young guns. But that, to me, it's very interesting because I wonder to myself, especially DeJounte Murray, so that's the one I want to kind of go with first.
Yeah.
If you have to give him up at this point to get Pascal Siakam, even though you probably have to throw in some other pieces, but just focusing on losing that piece, what are your thoughts on whether or not it's worth it? Is it?
Ooh, like, let me just say this. Like, I really feel like at this point, if the Hawks were to trade DeJounte Murray, I would be very concerned. Here's why. I'd be concerned because I will have no idea where they're going as far as with the direction of this team. Because here's the thing. You made a trade for him last year, 3 first-round picks, and you knew that you're going to have 2 years of control, and then you're going to have to figure out how to pay him if you're going to keep him long term. So now you're in a space where essentially you're going to trade for a guy that has 1 year left on his contract too, and then the reports are that he wants to test free agency, and he may even potentially come back to Toronto. That may still be on the table even after they were to trade him away. So I think that when you just talk about just that specific piece, saying that, hey, this part of this regime that's still here wanted DeJounte Murray.
Yes.
And now I feel like you have to make that work. You have to make that work because you hired a coach. We talked about how Quinn Snyder essentially is going to be like a free agent addition as far as upgrading his team and making this team better. So I think that you need to continue to go with that because, like I said, if we're sitting up here talking about 48 hours from now, 72 hours from now, however long, and DeJounte Murray is a part of that trade deal, I am very concerned. I'm going to start questioning, which I already have, start questioning this new regime because that makes the vision very muddy. Like I'm really big on seeing where the teams are going and these teams having vision, especially from the guys who are the decision makers. Like we talked about the Falcons and Terry Fontenot, Arthur Smith. We get it. We know where they're going. We know where they're headed. Now it's just a matter of them putting the work and actually the end result being what it is. But now, if DeJounte Murray isn't going to be a part of this team going into the season this year, it's not going to be clear, and I'm going to have a lot of questions to you.
Yeah, it would be troubling to me too because the things that were challenging in the Trae Young, DeJounte Murray backcourt duo was Trae never did kind of get to the point where off the ball was a place of comfort for him, right?
Right.
And DeJounte may have had to pull a little bit more of the offensive workload than maybe he thought he would, which in turn might be why his numbers were down defensively and even offensively because, I mean, after a while, you're just exhausted because you're playing a different kind of game because you're not accustomed to having to take on all of that, right? And so what if these guys got a good front court, a better front court, if you will? Wouldn't it stand to reason that, 1, a better front court, 2, arguably by most standards, a better coach, and 3, a second year together, wouldn't it stand to reason that maybe they would be one of the best backcourt duos? I saw one statistic that showed points to assists, and what Trae Young and DeJounte Murray were able to do despite not gelling for the most of the season was second only to Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. They were the only other duo in the backcourt in the history of the league that did what Trae Young and Dejounte Murray would be able to do. Imagine how much better they could make their stat line in terms of offensive efficiency, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, defensively. All of those things you haven't had a real opportunity to see for 2 years in a row, and definitely not under Quinn Snyder. That's part one. And part two, Jarvis, what concerns me is, where's your position of strength right now? I think you're fine at power forward. I do think you have probably a deeper, more talented kind of roster power forward wise. Jalen Johnson, Sadiq Bey. I mean, you can kind of move Onyeka Okongwu back and forth between the 4 and the 5. Now, those are maybe your 3 heavy hitters at small forward. If you look at what you have at shooting guard, yes, Bogey's solid, but we know he's pretty much a defensive liability. You can play AJ Griffin there as well. So, I mean, that's thought. But when you look at it, I still think there might be an edge of power forward where Quinn Snyder can groom those guys more easily than he can maybe groom the backup shooting guards to be where they need to be.
And I think that, you know, when you think about it from that standpoint as to who you have to put into place if the season were to start today, let's just put it like that. If the season were to start today, I wouldn't feel too bad about Sadiq Bey and or, you know, Jalen Johnson being in that starting lineup, because here's the thing. Like, I know that they got a full offseason with the guy, the best free agent addition so far, you know, for the Hawks, you know what I mean? So I think that I wouldn't be against, you know, those guys being there. And then to add on top of that, once you start to think about like all of the assets that you might have to give up, like we talked about Dejounte Murray, and you even talk about Onyeka Okongwu, and that's been one of the people that they want to keep around. They talking about giving them an extension. So yeah, like, it just doesn't make sense. Although I love Pascal Siakam's game, because I always thought that he's given the Hawks plenty of issues every time they went up against each other. It's just the fact that it's just too much. If we talking about him having 2 to 3 years maybe left on his contract, okay, let's have a conversation. Let's figure this bad boy out. But when you're talking about 1 year, you're talking about potentially this guy maybe returning once he becomes a free agent. And, you know, and then given the Hawks' financial situation, you know, and wanted to stay away from those aprons that we talked about. They ain't trying to cook. They're trying to stay away from those aprons. Like, this deal just doesn't make sense at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can't figure out how to package it where it could make sense. Right. Because even with the DeAndre Hunter side, I want to get your thoughts on that real quick as well. He's the other piece, whether that's DeJounte Murray, DeAndre Hunter, and some other pieces within the current team, like that's on the current roster, or we both know we don't want DeAndre Hunter and DeJounte Murray in that deal. Like, that to me just won't work. Right. But if it's DeAndre Hunter and a couple of other guys, is there any package that you could see that would make you feel okay about that?
Oh, wow. Given if DeAndre Hunter is the main piece that they want for whatever reason, I'm willing to listen, because here's the thing: we still don't know what he is, and like you said, he's under contract, and I feel like, you know, just from a consistency standpoint, he just hasn't been that guy. So, like, I don't know what he is. Like, yeah, you can pencil him in as a starter, yeah, okay, but I still don't know what he's going to give me night in and night out. So yeah, I still have questions with him being in the starting lineup to start the season. So I would be interested to see who they would want on top of DeAndre Hunter. And if you're talking about an AJ Griffin or a Onyeka Okongwu, I'm good, T.
I'm like, I don't know who to package that we'd be comfortable with. Yeah. You know, except DeAndre Hunter. Now, I'm going to tell you why I would be comfortable with that, because I think we do know exactly who he is. I think he's another John Collins, meaning that I believe he's probably gone as far as he can go. I don't know that there's any more that we're going to see from him from a consistency standpoint. Yeah. So no, I think if there were a way to do it, but it'd be very difficult, because you're talking about essentially a $10 million contract versus 35. that might be a bridge that's a little bit too far to cross. But everydayers, what do you guys think? I mean, this is one of those things where we're still postulating because we're all waiting to see, will the Hawks make a big splash in free agency? And there's still time left because remember, Dejounte Murray was not a free agent last year when they acquired him. So there may be somebody lurking who's not necessarily a free agent like Pascal Siakam, but someone maybe more affordable that they might want to go after. Let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube, and you can drop a comment in the chat and we will definitely maybe possibly speak on it on the show. And of course, download ATL Day Ones wherever you get your podcasts.
But T, this is For the Culture. This is the intersection between sports, entertainment, the culture, and sometimes whatever the hell we want to talk about. Because that's just how we get down on this show. Today is no different. How about this, T? You know, it all went down yesterday, and you know, we're celebrating with the 4th of July and all that stuff. You know, and sometimes how I get down. You know, I'm last minute. You know, I don't necessarily plan stuff like I should. You know, my wife kind of has conversation with me. You know how my wife is. You know, she'll have a conversation with me like, Jarvis, you need to plan stuff out more. You know, so I decided, you know, broke back and all, to doggone, you know, hey, go throw some meat on the grill. So I decided to do that yesterday, T. And, you know, it was some good times. And a lot of times I really feel like those last minute kind of barbecue situations, they always kind of turn out pretty well, you know. And I feel like it turned out pretty well yesterday. How did you kind of celebrate, you know, the 4th of July yesterday?
I grabbed some brunch. I've been trying to do that with my line sister for some weeks. So that was so very cool because we hadn't had a chance to catch up one-on-one, and I slept in, desperately needed to rest myself. I really, really did. But I also watched Essence Music Festival. You know, I haven't been able to go in about 3 years, but I like this whole concept that they have of virtual. If you have Hulu, you can watch them live. Now, unfortunately, they don't do the replay quite yet. Maybe that's next year. But year 2, this year, they really made you feel like you were right there. So I saw, you know, the ode to the Dirty South, Jermaine Dupri just killed it. Just the curating of that was just phenomenal. To me, that was one of the highlights. Of course, Missy Elliott, but I'd seen her before. So for me, it was just like, well, this is what Missy does. So it didn't shock me. But okay, got a secret. I did not know Tim's was a girl. I didn't know.
Now, what song did she sing? Because you know how these artists nowadays.
You don't want me trying to sing that song. You should go to YouTube. TEMS. Do yourself a favor because she's amazing. She is so amazing. She's Nigerian, and when you hear her voice, and when you YouTube, you know, search her. All her songs that pop up that she's done collabos with Drake and so many people, you're going to be like, oh, that was her. I mean, and that's what I loved about the performance. It was just so amazing. So yeah, she was one of the highlights, but just being able to watch that this past weekend virtually because I wasn't able to go home. That was good luck.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea because that's one of the things that I really feel like shouldn't go away after the pandemic. You know what I mean? Because there is obviously, yes, to be in person, that'd be great. But like when you have a situation like, you know, someone like yourself, like, hey, you can't get back there and you still want to be able to experience it. I think that's an amazing marketing tool because essentially what that's going to do is you're going to encourage people to come out, you know, and I think that, you know, I'm not in their marketing, you know, meetings, but I'm assuming that that's what they want people to do, to come out there and just go out there and just have a good time and, you know, have as big as turnout as they possibly can have. So for me, I think that's an excellent idea. Now you said Jermaine Dupri now, you know.
Yeah. Oh man, it was awesome. He had T.I. come through, Ludacris come through, the Franchise Boys came through. I mean, it was the only, you know, one you were maybe missing was like, I think Jeezy. I didn't see him unless I missed him. Jeezy wasn't there. But in terms of curating from maybe the start of where you guys are, and Big Boy and Sleepy Brown. So yeah, you really had all the heavy hitters there pretty much, you know, at least representation from the Dungeon family and representation from really every little nook and cranny. Oh, and you know full well that I'm not going to wrap up this For the Culture without saying, but the super highlight was showing off the FemCs because Salt and Pepper being able to reconcile with Spinderella and she was able to perform with them, killed it. Angie Marr did her bar from Ladies Night. That was cool. I love Remy Ma, so getting a chance to see her was really cool too. So yeah, all of that. I think Tim's was kind of in that mix, if you will, if I remember correctly. But yeah, That was beautiful. That was really beautiful. I told you, only hip hop can do this to me. But maybe what'll do this to me as well, or do this for me, is if the Braves can pull out the win and win this series with the Guardians tonight, so that they can go into that series with the Marlins on a winning note. We'll talk about it tomorrow. And if there is a Hawks trade of some sort, we're going to bring you our tea on it. So definitely, as you always do, come back and see us soon.
Absolutely. And make sure that you vote. Share love, show love, and most importantly, spread love.